in which the family enjoys spring break. Something I probably won't feel safe doing for, like another decade. Spoilers for this episode of Ducktales. For those interested, I made an update video a little while back promising some specific scripted videos to come. Well, thanks to my own pure incompetence, the timeline on many of those has been pushed back even further. I'ma try real hard to continue work on the ones I can in the meantime, but for not being able to keep my promises timely, I apologize. It feels like it's been a while since a proper Scrooge-centric episode of Ducktales. This show has thus far been really smart about balancing which members of its ensemble are the star in a given story, but Scrooge McDuck himself is one of at least 4 characters I'd call the protagonists of the show, and he's been a bit background this season. It only figures, too, that this is the first appearance this season of Goldie Gilt, the ostensible Catwoman to Scrooge's Batman. Both parties meet this episode on the hunt for the Fountain of Youth, and when they do end up regressing back into their teenaged bodies for reasons unknown to either of them, their quest quickly becomes second priority to some fun and flirting, of a much more wholesome and earnest variety than their usual barb trading. Meanwhile, the triplets are left to have sibling rivalry-based shenanigans at the nearby hotel, which all parties soon discover has a dark connection to the fountain. Gotta say, I really dig the way the plot shakes out in this one. Having it turn out that the fountain transfers youth from people who soak in the water to those who drink it is a great twist on the trope. For a show with DuckTales' target audience, it's almost too clever for its own good. I can imagine younger kids needing multiple watches before they really wrap their heads around the mechanics here. Evil hotel owner Ponce de Leon's scheme, involving a centuries-long body count to keep himself young via the portal's properties, makes him maybe one of the most despicable characters in this show, and the super dark comeuppance he gets at the end is fitting. That said, his whole thing of making sure his hotel runs to a certain standard despite being totally evil is fun, but also narratively justified. The guy needs his hotel to be good enough that it attracts customers for him to murder, after all. But for as interesting as all this is, it's not the highlight of the episode. That would be the central relationship between Goldie and Scrooge. These two are always a fascinating and charming pair, and for me their relationship is at its peak in this episode. Unlike a lot of other cartoons, playing with the characters' ages in this episode is done for more than just a fun novelty. For the main characters in particular, there's no real indication that becoming teens has made them any less mature than they already were, so much as it did just bring down some of their walls for completely character-based reasons. Goldie in particular looks at their new youth as a chance for a fresh start for the both of them. A do-over for them to have the life they've always wanted as a pair. This is the kind of thing I don't think either party would be super upfront about wanting with each other, and now we can view that as a sign on both their parts that maybe they figured with how old they were it was just too late. Scrooge and Goldie have been at their little game with each other for several decades, if not more. They likely took their odd enemies or lovers tightrope act as just the intrinsic nature of things between them. She treats their whole dysfunctional dynamic like their physical age is responsible for their inability to grow out of it, but really she's just looking for an excuse to do what she's maybe always wanted. This is roundaboutly reflected in Webby, who sees the new youthful and exuberant Scrooge and can hardly recognize who she's looking at, even though fairly little about the man, Duck's values, methods, or feelings have actually changed. Webby's is a child's view of age and maturity, fixated more on the trappings that make up Scrooge's appearance as an old man than the actual wisdom that comes with that age. It's no wonder why neither Scrooge or Goldie give her worries the time of day, and it's honestly cute how much all 4 of the kids this episode have much more simplistic arc next to the older pair. Huey and Dewey foil Scrooge and Goldie, in the sense that Dewey and Goldie are the ones eager to let the magic of the pool water shift the dynamics of their respective relationships, while Scrooge and Huey are the ones who know going in that doing so requires not just age, but maturity. I like this parallel because it highlights how, like Dewey so often does, Goldie is deluding herself. Both ducks are also an interesting comparison point for Ponce de Leon, who, in being by far the oldest member of the cast, further proves that maturity and wisdom isn't measured in physical age, but in one's actions. That's not to say Scrooge is perfect. He often falls into bouts of selfishness, and in fact began this series having to learn a very similar lesson to the one that Goldie does here, to openly display earnest care and love for people, and not worry so much about appearances or the possibility of getting burned. Even as an old goat, Scrooge is open about his care for Goldie, like when he puts his arm out ahead of her before they both run off a cliff, among other things, while even as a young woman, Duck, Goldie is falling back on old habits until she finally starts making the selfless choice and admits that she cares.
The hotel owner's turning everyone old! Save yourself!
I always do.
I love that without making a huge deal out of it, Louie is a big part of why Goldie stays to help. However, her arc isn't complete just yet, as up until the very end, she's still eager to hold on to her newfound youth and the fresh start she thinks it can bring. Sure, Scrooge would like to hold on to his youth as well. I really love this quick character beat where Goldie actually considers taking Ponce de Leon up on his offer, and you can see the gears turning in Scrooge's head as he runs through the gamut of emotions, first surprise and then maybe actually considering it. But this episode is about Goldie's growth more so than his, because Scrooge has already learned that a fresh start doesn't mean rolling back the clock, it means making better choices. Being empathetic, selfless, and at least occasionally letting the walls down around the people you love. We establish in Goldie's introduction back in Season 1 that she either can't or refuses to engage in her relationship with Scrooge beyond their mutual cat and mouse. And whenever the two are paired up, Goldie keeps things flirty and competitive and gets a kick out of that while Scrooge is eternally frustrated. This dynamic is fun, but it's also, well, toxic. Scrooge has proven willing to open his heart up to Goldie, but in what now retroactively feels like something born out of fear, Goldie always opts to default to their backstabbing status quo. Scrooge does find Goldie's ability to one-up him incredibly attractive, but what they both really need to have something resembling a healthy relationship is for Goldie to come out and make it clear to Scrooge that she likes him. She values him as something more than just a fun pastime or equal/foil in treasure hunting. And by the end of this episode, she finally reaches that place. She doesn't run off to her next scheme when the action is over. The story ends with her and Scrooge still together, being openly affectionate with no fronts or pretenses. It's really heartwarming and cathartic to watch, as is their prior tag team sword duel with Leon, just incredibly satisfying. Now, as much as I can and have raved about this episode, it's not flawless. Biggest mark against it is that almost as soon as I finished it, I completely forgot that Duck was even in it. And for the secondary villain of the piece and the thing tying it back to the foul season arc, that's not great. Duck just isn't really entertaining or memorable as a character, and that applies to both episodes he's been a major part of. He's incredibly milquetoast as characters in this show go, and I'm not sure he adds anything to the story's themes that isn't also accomplished by Ponce de Leon. He feels like a tangent whenever he shows up, entering and exiting the story with a whimper when it feels plenty complete without him. That business aside, Fountain of the Foreverglade is a great episode, with a lot of meat to dig into and a cogent set of messages for both kids and adults. But hey, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Did you have the same merits and issues I did? Like if you like, sub to boost my ego, and I'll see you all next time.